Hi, my name is Rachel Shoiga. I'm a criminologist and I've been involved with Community Plan and Reclaim Holloway for the past 5 years or so since the closure of the prison. So today, myself and Nikki Gibbs, who's also a member of the campaign, are going to talk through the women's building in the Peabody Master Plan. So for us, this building is central to remembering the history of the site and offering a meaningful living legacy for the women who were held in the prison. So in Holloway, a lot of people don't know that women accessed really essential services that we think ought to be available within the community rather than through the criminal justice system. So this building is an opportunity to build a home for services in the community, therapies and all kinds of support under the one roof, offering a holistic space for organisations to offer services for women. So in terms of what Peabody is offering in this master plan, first of all, what's been offered is not a women's building, and continuing to call it a women's building is disingenuous and it's misleading. What's being offered is a single floor underneath a block of flats, underneath 14 levels of flats above. So the developer and the architects have engaged with us over the years, but they haven't listened when we've offered our feedback in the course of the consultation, especially in relation to the women's building. It's really been a one-way conversation. So the plans for the women's building have largely not changed over the course of the last year or so. What's really important for us is to acknowledge that there just isn't enough space to be able to provide the kinds of services that were included in the prison, and that we don't have enough space to be able to offer a home, a visionary home for the services in the way that we want. Another essential point for us is that the red brick facade is reminiscent of the prison building, which is potentially very triggering for the women who've been in the prison and who are now hoping to come to the women's building in order to access services. In terms of the legacy of the prison, this is also a really important point. This is a really crucial side of women's history, a history of state violence and also a history of resistance. And we want that to be reflected in the design. It's appropriate that that will be reflected in the design. When we asked the architects what design principles have been considered, we were told that the women's building is different from the other buildings on the site because of the curvy balconies and corners, which doesn't cut it. It's not appropriate. So another essential point is that Peabody are emphasizing the flexibility of the spaces provided within the women's building. But we want the women's organizations and services that should find a home here to have a sustainable space to work from. So to be able to have offices, to be able to offer services within the building in a sustainable way and not have to move from place to place. So at that, I'll hand over to Nikki to take you through the next part.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Next slide, there we go. So as Rachel was explaining, the current women's building on offer really does not provide a space that the services that were in Holloway can actually function from. This is basically a community centre and is, according to the council's brief, designed around flexible spaces. Now, a flexible space community centre has an operating model that we don't think is suitable for the women's services that need to operate from here. I'll take you through to the next slide, which is a slide from a previous master plan. Apparently the spaces have grown bigger. This is for a 1,250 square metre plan, and apparently the plan is now 1,400 square metres, but we have no indication of how the plans have actually increased. The layout in the master plan that's been released now is ostensibly the same as you see here. So we have a creche that in the current plans is supposed to double as a art department, which is completely impossible and not therapeutically suitable for women at all. It treats them like children. Also, having looked in a creche at a previous community centre, there's no way you can clean out the creche to change it for purpose. So flexibility is a good thing, but it doesn't always work. In here, we also have a cafe. It's a general cafe. It's not for women only. We strongly feel that there should be a women-only cafe as well, a reception area, and a multi-purpose hall that can be hired out to the community. So these 4 spaces are really community spaces. It's the 2 purple spaces, top right and bottom left, that are actually for the women's services, and these add up to about 350 square meters. The top right purple areas here are prescribed therapy rooms, which we don't feel is really appropriate, because therapy doesn't just get delivered as a prescribed service. Therapy comes in all sorts of ways. It might be cooking, it might be creating art, it might be, you know, playing with clay and doing ceramics. It's not always a one-to-one or a group therapy class. We're also very concerned that these spaces need to be very trauma informed. So although this area here can be shut away from the rest of the community hub area, if you want to travel between one area and the other, you have to walk either around the outside of the building or you have to walk through the general areas. Bottom left, we have the rooms that are proposed for the offices, which are supposed to be flexible as well. So what does that mean? That services can only be in there for hour-long periods of time, for 1 day a week? That doesn't really meet the needs of women, who would then have to take time off work on multiple days to come and receive the services that they need. It also doesn't allow the services to network holistically together, because they wouldn't ever be there in the building at the same time. We'll just move on to the gardens now. So they've offered a landscaped women's garden that is at the rear of this building. It's 475 square meters or so, which actually isn't that big when you're in an outdoor space. It only receives, according to their plans, 1% of sunlight. There aren't really any open grass areas to do outside classes on, like they're sort of proposing in some of their latest slides. And I'm very concerned that with receiving so little sunlight, you wouldn't actually get a chance to grow these edible vegetables and things, because they just wouldn't grow. So I really think that, you know, this sort of holistic reflective space, excuse me, that's been offered really doesn't live up to the proposed ideas that they're trying to convey to us. So from there, I shall pass you back to Rachel, who is going to talk to you about the vision that we have for the women's building and what a much better solution might look like.
Thanks very much, Nikki. Yeah, I think the garden also is very telling as a missed opportunity, a kind of symbol of a missed opportunity, that some of the kind of meaningful existing features of the garden, like the Holloway tree, which was a really important tree for the women there, isn't being celebrated or made the centre of a garden. So I think the issues of legacy aren't being held up in that space either. So the vision that we have for the women's building is very different and much more expansive than the one that Peabody seems to have. So we see this women's building as a home for services, as a visionary space of healing and support for women in the community. So we're thinking about women who have had contact with the criminal justice system, but also women in the wider community, because we know that it's issues of poverty, drug abuse, trauma, structural disadvantage that pushes women toward the criminal justice system in the first place. This is a visionary way of thinking about supporting women before they run into trouble and helping them at various points in their lives so that they have somewhere to go, that this building can be a beacon of hope and a place of transformative justice in the community. So we see this as a space that can be built by women construction workers, that can offer enterprise opportunities for women, where women are involved in the planning of the building, the design of the building, and the running of the building, creating a safe space and an effective, productive space of healing in the community. So we feel that this kind of vision is the only appropriate one for the legacy of Holloway Prison. And we hope that we've convinced you with this presentation that we need to see more from this master plan, that the amount of space that's been offered just doesn't, it's not fit for purpose in terms of this more visionary space.
Just add to the end that there were actually 40 or so services that used to operate from Holloway Prison. So just to give a picture of the amount of services that could be covered in there, and that would go from not just the creative services, but domestic violence services, debt services, addiction services, you know, all sorts of services that go from healing to new skills learning and empowerment. And I think that's what's really missing here. So thank you.